Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more notable names in Pacific Islander and Asian American history. This was meant to be Monday's video, but anyway, today we are looking at Bhagat Singh Thind, or Thind, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. But anyway, first article we have up here is National Park Service. He was an Indian independence activist, immigrant to the United States, and a World War I veteran. Quest for naturalization is a key part of the long struggle to remove racial barriers to U.S. citizenship. He was born in the Punjab region of India, migrated to Seattle in 1913 to attend graduate school. He was one of around 7,000 Indian men who arrived in the Pacific Northwest around this time, and many of whom were Punjabi Sikhs who were fleeing civil unrest, disease, and repression by British colonial authorities in India. They sought economic and educational opportunities in the U.S. He studied religion and literature at the University of California, Berkeley, and spent summers working at lumber mills in Astoria, Oregon. Asian immigrants face considerable racial discrimination and violence. Remember, they have the law that made it so Asians who immigrated couldn't become citizens up until I want to say in the 40s at some point, but yeah. A lot of just racism involved in American history. In 1907, a white mob in the town of Bellingham in Washington State attacked several Asian workers there, driving more than 100 of them away permanently. In Oregon, Thind worked with other Punjabis as well as workers from Europe, especially Finnish immigrants. Many of them had been involved in labor and political activism in their home countries. A radical political culture had begun to take root in the community, and Thind joined the Ghadar Party, which organized Indian immigrants in North America and advocated to overthrow British colonial rule. In its first meeting, held at Finnish Socialist Hall in Astoria, Oregon, Ghadar itself means revolt or rebellion in the Urdu language. British agents in Oregon knew about the Ghadar Party and spied on its members, including Thind. In 1914, some members of the group returned to India in an attempt to incite an armed rebellion, which failed. Thind remained in the United States, but he stayed involved with the independence movement. When the U.S. entered World War I in 1917, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, and as part of his Sikh religion, he wore a turban and became the first turbaned soldier in American military. Thind trained at Camp Lewis in Tacoma, Washington, and was honorably discharged in 1918. While he was in the Army, he applied for U.S. citizenship. Initially, the court approved his petition, but the Bureau of Naturalization opposed it, and the court overturned its own order days later. At issue was the question of Thind's race. The Naturalization Act of 1790 had stated that only free white persons of good character could become citizens. Later laws and court decisions, especially the 14th Amendment and the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, expanded this group. But in the early 20th century, most Asian Americans were still excluded from citizenship on the grounds that they were not white. Even those from Far East China, especially Far East Asia, a little further north, they have much fairer skin. They could easily pass for white. It's just the only thing you could usually tell is their eyes. And it's like, it's just, there's no reason to sit there and whine and complain and bitch the way some of these racist assholes do. Even if they're not the same race, what does it matter? The next year, he applied for citizenship again, this time in Oregon, and argued that he should, in fact, be considered a white man. At the time, some anthropologists claimed to be able to divide the world's population into distinct races. People from India were sometimes considered part of the Caucasian race, and Caucasian was also a synonym for white. A judge in Thind's case decided that this was a strong enough argument, and also took into account his Thind's military service, and granted him citizenship in November of 1920. However, the Bureau of Naturalization still opposed to his citizenship. They appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court and asked the court to rule on whether people from India could be counted as white. In 1923, the court unanimously ruled the answer was no. The common man in the United States would not recognize Thind as white, and therefore he wasn't. The above article, like most press coverage of Thind's cases, describes all Indians as Hindus, regardless of their actual religious beliefs. Yeah, Hindu isn't a race. It's a religion. Anyway, as a result of this decision, dozens of Americans from India lost their citizenship status. The Thind case now shows how definitions of race could change over time and be subject to interpretation in ways that had real consequences for people's lives. The article, let's look at that here. Hindus too brunette to vote here. Not even the high caste Brahmin, who scientists say maintain that his Aryan ancestors came from the same Caucasian stock as our own, can any longer, the Fresno, California Morning Republican points out, be considered white in this country. The recent decision of the Supreme Court of the U.S. that Hindus are not free white persons has been held for the most part with delight by the California press, and that our western seaboard, which we find has a Hindu problem just as much as a Japanese problem, and the Fresno paper opines that this is surely an instance in which a court had decided on facts and not in inferences. Yeah, you can see how much it is dripping in racism. Hindu problem. Japanese problem. Yeah. Later life in 1935, Thind would become a U.S. citizen for the third and final time after Congress granted legal status to all World War I veterans. It was not until 1940 that all people from India became eligible for naturalization. Thind became a writer and a lecturer on philosophy and Sikh religion and died in 1967. So, yeah. Goodness. Now, this is from Justia.com. Minimize that. What was that talking about? Free summaries. Oh, okay. I might actually sign up for that, but we'll do that later. Anyway, in the case United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind, 1923. A high caste Hindu of full Indian blood, born at Amritsar, Punjab, India, is not a white person within the meaning of Reb Stats relating to naturalization of Indians. Free white persons, as used in that section, are words of common speech to be interpreted in accordance with the understanding of the common man, synonymous with the word Caucasian only as that word is popularly understood, as noted in the case Ozawa versus the United States. The action of Congress in excluding from admission to this country all natives of Asia within designated limits, including all of India, is evidence of a lack attitude toward naturalization of Asians within those limits. Questions certified by the Circuit Court of Appeals arising upon an appeal to that court from a decree on the district court dismissing on motion a bill brought by the United States to cancel a certificate of naturalization. Let's see, that was 23. Yeah, took a little over a month. Argued January 11th, decided February 19th. Okay, so the first thing they offer here as a high caste Hindu, full blood, a white person within meaning. The cause is hereupon a certificate from the Circuit Court of Appeals requesting the instruction of this court in respect of the following question. Does the act of February the 5th, 1917 disqualify from naturalization as citizens those Hindus now barred by that act who had lawfully entered the United States prior to the passage of said act? The appealee was granted a certificate of citizenship by the District Court of the United States for the District of Oregon over the objection of the Naturalization Examiner for the United States. Probably a real bad racist, that Naturalization Examiner. Tended to see how he treated people. A bill in equity was then filed by the U.S. seeking a cancellation of the certificate on the ground that The appealee was not a white person and therefore not lawfully entitled to naturalization. The district court, on motion, dismissed the bill, and an appeal was taken to the Circuit Court of Appeals. No question is made in respect to the individual qualifications of the appealee. The sole question is whether he falls within the class designated by the Congress as eligible. Shall apply to aliens being free white persons and to aliens of African nativity to persons of African descent. Yeah, so provides the provisions of the Naturalization Act shall only apply to white persons and those of African descent, because there were so many slaves. It was ridiculous. All because of that of slavery and thirst for money with free labor. If the applicant is a white person within the meaning of this section, he is entitled to naturalization. Otherwise not. In Ozawa versus the U.S., we had occasion to consider the application of these words to the case of a cultivated Japanese, and were constrained to hold that he was not within their meaning. As there pointed out, the provision is not at any particular class or person shall be excluded, but it is in effect that only white persons shall be included within the privilege of the statute. Yeah. They're trying to say, see, it's not being racist against anybody. It's just saying that it'll only be white people included, not kicking any particular race out. Yeah. The intention was to confer the privilege of citizenship upon the class of persons from whom the fathers knew as white, and deny it to all who could not be so classified. It is enough to say that the framers did not have in mind the brown or yellow races of Asia. It is necessary to go farther and be able to say that had these particular races been suggested, the language of the act would have been so varied as to include them within its privileges. Citing the case Dartmouth College versus Woodward, following a long line of decisions of the lower federal courts, we held that the words imported a racial and not an individual test, and were meant to indicate only persons of what is popularly known as the Caucasian race. But, as there pointed out, the conclusion that the phrase white persons and the word Caucasian are synonymous does not end the matter. It enabled us to dispose of the problem as it was there presented, since the applicant for citizenship clearly fell outside the zone of debatable ground on the negative side. But the decision still left the question to be dealt with in doubtful and different cases by the process of judicial inclusion and exclusion. Here, mere ability on the part of the applicant for naturalization to establish a line of descent from the Caucasian ancestor will not ipso facto and necessarily conclude the inquiry. Caucasian is a conventional word of much flexibility as a study of the literature dealing with racial questions will disclose, and while it and the words white persons are treated as synonymous for the purposes of that case, they are not of identical meaning item per item. Let's see. So we go through a lot of the breakdown of what was said and quoted. But yeah, it gives a lot of information on the actual case. In 1923, I believe this is the first one. We know he retried. I think this is, I can't remember. Let's see. Yeah, in the army because he was fighting for the country. And the court said, okay, that's cool. But the Bureau of Naturalization, clearly a racist fucking organization, said, nah, we don't like it. Again, so much racism in American history. I'm telling y'all. I'm sure some people don't know it, but I'm sure there's also a lot of people who do, who are aware of it. But yeah, this is a picture of him in his army uniform during World War One. He was the first U.S. serviceman to be allowed, for religious reasons, to wear a turban as part of his military uniform. Which, this always bugs me. And again, it's part of the racist and ignorant attitude of many Americans. Especially after 9/11, you saw, they would call Muslims all kinds of names, trying to insinuate they're the ones that wear a turban, blah, blah, blah. And there were American Sikhs who suffered at the hands of these stupid people because of their racist stupidity. Let's be honest about that. But yeah. He was born October 3rd, 1892 in Taragar, Talawa, Amritsar, Punjab Province, British India, present day Punjab, India. He would pass away September 15th, 1964 or 67 in Los Angeles, California, 74 years of age. Let's see. Looks like we have 3 spouses. Chint Kaur, Inez Buelen, married 23, divorced 27. Vivian Davies, married 1940. I don't know. Anyway, Indian diaspora writer and lecturer on spirituality who served in the U.S. Army during World War I and was involved in a big Supreme Court case over the right of Indian people, Asian people in general, to obtain U.S. citizenship. Among a group of men of Indian ancestry who attempted to claim he was white and naturalized under the federal naturalization law. Born October 3rd, 1892 in the village of Taragar Talawa in the Amritsar district in the state of Punjab in India. As he grew into adulthood, he began his collegiate studies at Khalsa College, Amritsar, where he began to foster his academic interest. He would then travel to the Philippines, where he worked orally translating languages for a brief period of time. Then he would arrive in the U.S. in 1913 to pursue higher education at an American university. July 22nd, 1918, he was recruited by the U.S. Army to fight World War I. They say 1918, though this has it 1917. Regardless, he was recruited to fight in World War I. The war itself, though, would end, 1917. The war itself would end in 1918, which is why he was probably discharged in 1918. He was promoted to the rank of acting sergeant and received an honorable discharge with his character designated as excellent. So yeah, did wonderful. The Ghadar movement. His first United States citizenship, which was when he was in World War I, and the court said, okay, but you have these bastards who just sound like racist jackasses. Thind's nationality was referred to as Hindu or Hindu in all legal documents and in the news media, despite being a practicing Sikh. Again, people need to learn. There's more than just what you yourself think. Educate. Right there. Educate thyself. Learn. There's more. At that time, they were in the U.S. and Canada called Hindus regardless of the religion. Yeah, he became citizen and it was revoked 4 days later on the grounds he was not a white man. He applied again May 6, 1919. The same bureau official who revoked his citizenship tried to convince the judge to refuse citizenship, accusing Thind of involvement in the Ghadar Party, which campaigned for Indian independence from colonial rule. That imperial racist mindset. Gotta love that bullshit. Thind was among a small group of Indian immigrants whose claim to the U.S. citizenship came under question because of their involvement in anti-imperial politics. Many of these immigrants were of more elite status, and judges interpreted their caste status, completion of a college education, fluency in English and Western decorum, and networks with white citizens as evidence of their whiteness. Judges and immigrants relied on ideas of caste purity, skin color, and ancestral heritage, race science theories, and other constructions of race to distinguish race. The judge took all arguments and Thind's military record into consideration and declined to agree with the Bureau of Naturalization, thus giving him his citizenship to the U.S. a second time. It would be appealed to the Supreme Court, which we've already looked at and showed that the Supreme Court overturned it. Third and final U.S. citizenship. He petitioned for naturalization a third time through the state of New York in 1935 after the Congress passed the NALEA Act, which made World War I veterans eligible for naturalization regardless of race. Based on his status as a veteran of the U.S. military during World War I, he was finally granted U.S. citizenship nearly 2 decades after he first time petitioned for naturalization. Let's see. Outlived by his wife Vivian, whom he had married in March 1940, his daughter Rosalind Stubenberg, and son David Bhagat Thind. 2 of his books were self-published posthumously by his son, Troubled Mind in a Torturing World and Their Conquest and Winners, and Whiners in This Whirling World. So yeah, Troubled Mind in a Torturing World and Their Conquest, Winners and Whiners in This Whirling World. And I've got other books listed here that he wrote. Radiant Road to Reality, Science of Union with God, The Pearl of Greatest Price, House of Happiness, Jesus the Christ, In the Light of Spiritual Science, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, The Enlightened Life, Tested Universal Science of Individual Meditation in Sikh Religion, and Divine Wisdoms, Volume 1, 2, and 3. And we done talked about the 2 posthumously released. NPR's Throughline podcast put Thind's story on the context of Indo-European language theory and its abuse to justify racist ideology in the 20th century. Yeah, remember, lots of racism, and then you've got the stupid, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the pseudoscience of clearly these races are less intelligent than this race. This is, no, you're a stupid fucking moron and you need to study more. Get to the back of the line. Anyway, 2020, the story of a Supreme Court case, was part of PBS's documentary Asian Americans. Hit case was also covered in Seen on Radio's series, Seeing White. But yeah, Bhagat Singh Thind. And again, just shows the racist assholery that is so much of American history. People may not want to accept that or recognize that, but it's just how it is. It's just filled to the brim with racism. Don't know what else to tell you, man. It really is. But someone learned was willing to do what was needed and fought to become a U.S. citizen. Yeah. Bhagat Singh Thind. Again, I'm not sure if it's Thind or Tind. But yeah. Anyway, we'll go ahead and end this episode there. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.